Kravitz. If you have not followed his Triple H horse racing podcast, you're missing out. It's one of the best podcasts in the country.
Good evening and welcome to episode 227 of the HHH Racing Podcast. I'm your proud host, Howard Kravitz. Thanks for joining us tonight as we recap an unbelievable stakes day at Gulfstream Park this past Saturday for the Pegasus World Cup. Please make sure you subscribe on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. You guys know the drill by now. Hit that notification bell so that you know when new content will arise, as we have a lot of shows coming up, extra shows as well, of course, with the Super Bowl and many other things on Bettin and Boozin. You don't want to miss all the exciting action here on the podcast. And smash that thumbs up button, that like button. We'd really appreciate it. That will send people to the YouTube channel. You can reach me, of course, on Twitter at HKravitz, and the bottom of the screen, hkravitzhorse@gmail.com is my email. Of course, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. The power picks have been hot. They were red hot this past weekend. We tipped out many winners. Actually, between our hosts, we pretty much had every stakes winner except for Art Collector on the end. I also tipped out some big prices underneath in exactas and trifectas. So it was an extremely good day for the podcast. We'll be talking about that as well. Unfortunately, we could not tip out the big winner of the day, Art Collector, but we'll be talking about that. We have a great website, hhhracingpodcast.com, which has all bunch of information there as well. We got Michael Osen here. Pegasus Day bets tricky with no singles, no question about it. Of course, Lon Garfield. What's up, Lon? Thanks for joining the show. Please make sure if you are watching, we'd like to have a lot of comments there in the chat. We'd greatly appreciate any comments you have. We're going to be talking about the Pegasus races in pretty much detail, and we're going to show the stretch runs of the races as well. All right, I think that's going to take care of all the particulars. We've got some great shows coming up, I should mention, as you see on the bottom of the screen. Tomorrow night, Bettin and Boozin, 9 p.m. Eastern. They're recovering the NBA Thursday slate. If you're watching and you're part of our email list, had a little mistake there. We're going to be talking in detail about the NBA Thursday slate on Bet and Boozin tomorrow night, along with a really good pick four sequence Saturday at Gulfstream Park. All that will be on Bet and Boozin. And then Thursday night, our flagship show, myself and Pete Visco and Peter Thomas Fornital, making his first appearance on the HHH Racing Podcast. Does a great job as the creator and host of the In the Money Media podcast. Will be with us to talk about a really exciting day at Santa Anita this Saturday with their late pick 5, 2 grade stakes, and of course the Kentucky Derby prep, the Robert B. Lewis. We'll be talking about that as well. All right. Without further ado, let me bring on one of my co-hosts. I thought we were going to have Paul Halloran. Perhaps I made a mistake. Maybe my great co-host Pete Visco can help me with that. But for right now, let's bring on my great co-host from the state of Maryland, Mr. Pete Visco. Pete, how you doing tonight?
What's up, my friend? How's it going?
I'm doing. Did I miss something? Is Paul?
I don't remember. I thought he was going to be on. He responded.
I thought so too.
Or maybe we're just both stupid and don't pay attention when he
that,
talks.
I'll
That
tell
could
you
be it
something.
as well.
I'll tell you someone who's not stupid, young man. You over there, you were hot. We're going to be talking about that during the show as I'm just checking my email. I don't see anything. Perhaps maybe I can just expound on something. You can give me a quick call, Pete, or a quick text.
Yeah,
perhaps
I'll shoot
the next
something.
few minutes. Actually, why don't you just stay on? We'll give it a minute. We thought Paul was going to be on tonight. Hope everything's okay, obviously, but I'm assuming it is. Might be just miscommunication, Pete. I'll tell you, Pete, I'm going to take you off screen for a minute or two and see if you can get in touch with Paul and see what's going on there. And I'll just go ahead and talk about my quick reaction from Saturday. So, Pete, I'm going to take you off the screen real quick.
Okay.
And see if we can find out what's going on. We'll bring you back in just a minute here. So Saturday was a fantastic day. Let me just say a few things about Saturday. First of all, I talked about this. By the way, if you were watching our show from the Villa Park, from the Crazy Pour OTB in Villa Park, we had a lot of fun. We had a great time. It was myself, Matt Miller. It was great. And Kyle Roscoe had a real nice crowd out there. Everything was wonderful, as I might be getting a text here. Let me see. And it was from Paul. And okay, I guess he's not coming. I gave him the night off. I didn't even remember that. Okay, well, let's bring Pete back on then. Pete, I guess I gave him the night off.
I mean, hey, hey, no today, no Thursday. He's living the life this week.
Well, he might try to join us Thursday. He's
but that's more of a travel. That's more of a travel schedule.
Yeah, he's going to be en route to the hotel. So, of course, he's basking in the wonderful sun of Florida. So, Pete, that's all right. You and I can handle this, no problem.
We got it.
I was just talking about the Crazy Pro OTB. It was a lot of fun there. We had a great crowd. We almost had 60 people, which is almost a record for them signing up. There were, of course, awesome. A lot of people in the OTB.
I see Matt's in the chat as well, so he can.
Oh, terrific!
He can comment on it.
No, let's see what Matt. No Paul tonight. I haven't texted him. He thinks he has. Okay, well, yes, I guess that's fine. That's cool. But
where were you 2 minutes ago, Matt, when we were looking for some answers? Where were you?
We got Penn State Scott. Welcome, gents. Should have faded. Ooh.
Rosario was awful. I mean, that was unbelievable.
Was he on Wakanaka?
He was on Wakanaka. That was a terrible ride, and there was a lot of lasts and far in the back rides that I'm sure we'll get to when we get to the races themselves.
Yeah, it was not pretty. Richard Flax had Art Collector. Richard, nice job, buddy. I thought it was a nice overlay. Certainly was 15-1. None better than Mott getting a horse.
Good call
for a race. I mean, Bill Mott. What are you going to say? But we'll talk about him. All right, let's go right to. I was just looking at the comments, but let's go right to the races, Pete. And I was mentioning, of course, for the show that we had, between myself, you, and Paul, we really had a great day. And individually, I think you had the most actually winners on the day, at least picking them out. So I'm still trying to figure out how you didn't have the late pick 5. I'm guessing Art Collector.
No, you know what's funny? I don't know if this happens to you, but when you're putting a sequence together, do you ever know when you sit there and go, I know exactly what horse is going to screw me, what horse is going to come in that I chopped off the ticket? And I always know. And Art Collector was never in contention, so I would have lost anyway. But Endorsed was the one that I cut. And, well, I just made a mistake in that race. That was a race where I had no opinion and should have went deeper, and I didn't strengthen my opinions in a couple of the other races and go skinny. So Endorse was sort of my budgetary, one of my last cuts. And I even said, I'm like, this is the horse that's going to do it. And when he won, I was like, of course. But luckily, I wouldn't have had Art Collector anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered in the end.
No, I didn't have Art Collector either. But we'll get to that race. Pete, let's jump right in right now. And we're just going to, again, we're going to talk about these races fairly briefly. Pete, I'll show the chart as we usually do, and I'll just show the stretch run. And we can we'll talk about the first race. Let me go ahead and bring up the banner here. The first race we're going to talk about is, of course, the La Prevoyante Stakes, won by Personal Best. And listen, we are very honest on this show as always. We will say good things and bad things. Paul Howard and myself did tip out Personal Best. I'll tell you what pissed me off here, Pete, before I talk about the race. I played in the Pegasus World Betting Championship, as you well know. It's a $6,000 buy with a $5,000 live cash bankroll. I qualified for it, so I didn't have to cough up the 6K. This horse was 2-1, Pete. Like all the way until the gate.
Yeah.
They spring the latch, and then, I don't know, midway into the first turn, 6-5. I mean, I guess it's CAWs. I know it's a whole other conversation, Pete, but I placed a big, and I mean big, win bet on Personal Best. I think it was a $2,000 bet. And for those of you who are saying, wow, Howard's Mr. Moneybags, again, guys, I'd never, ever bet that amount. But I had $5,000 to play. And Pete, I decided before the day that this was one of my, no pun intended, best choices because it was one of the smaller fields on the day. And I just was a little bit against adventuring. And so I made a big bet hoping to, double up, triple up. And then this freaking horse goes off 6-5, but nonetheless, a great win.
I mean, a win is a win, but yeah, that sucks. But I mean, I think that's been a plague to the sport to begin with. So I mean, that's a bigger issue, and I think it rears its head in tournaments and stuff like that, just because of what you're talking about. You think, hey, I'm making this bet, especially if you're like, say, behind in a tournament. You think you're making a bet that's going to jump you up, and then the gate breaks, and you go, damn, I got screwed. by the odds drop. So.
Well, Pete, they won 23-2. Yeah, and we're not going to show the beginning. I'll show the end here in just a second.
Yeah.
But this was one of the few fast paces of the day, really. And that's, to me, that's the theme of the day, unfortunately for me. 23-2, 48 going this distance, adventuring with Rosario wanting to get the lead. I guess he could have taken back Pete early and just let Beside Herself go. He was pretty stubborn. I'm assuming instructions were go to the lead. But at what cost? It ended up costing him the race.
Yeah, and then sometimes he or I should say she already making the mistake. I was thinking more Rosario when I said that, but
right, that's a tough one, right? The male jockey.
Yeah, it's the male jockey.
Horse. You know what? I'm not going to drink because I think I agree.
I'll take it anyway. But
all right,
that's one where it's a tough decision because it's not like adventuring doesn't go to the lead and hasn't won on the lead. So you have a horse who's comfortable on the lead when needs to be there. But did he need to take her there in this race? That's I guess the toughest choice. So, yeah. I mean, it's Rosario, and he didn't give many good rides the whole day, as some of our commenters have been mentioning. So I could blame him, but I mean, it's not like, look at that. That's a pretty comfortable lead. I mean, it was a little quicker in spots than maybe you would like, but now the 4 is pressing enough to where the 5 had never gone this long, had never won going this long, and had never gone this long. And that was one of my notes, which is a little why I was pissed that I had that horse on top in the end. But yeah, that 2 is ranging beautifully.
I was watching the race. I was right next to Matt Miller, of course. And Matt had the 5. Matt, I hope you don't mind me saying that, because the 5 was very logical also. I just stopped it here, Pete, because he was just sitting on go. I mean, he was absolutely just waiting. Right here, I'm like, this horse is not going to lose. He hasn't even really asked yet. He's just gliding.
No, it's over right there.
Just a perfect ride. Just absolutely perfect ride. Great trip.
Yeah, and that was the trip that was pretty successful a lot of the day, too. And that one, I mean, and it, the 5 held a little bit for a minute, and the 6 ran the transient who was obvious. To me, it was these 3 were pretty much the obvious top 3, and they sort of ran the way they should. I was pissed because I looked at my notes after, and the 2, everything in my notes basically said exactly what happened, and I wound up picking against it. But I didn't bet this race anyway. I just had it in our grid and our power picks. But other than that, I knew you had it, so I was happy for you, and you gave it out in the power picks as well as one of your choices, right?
I did.
So,
and by the way, Matt Miller, thanks to Howard, this horse, and Wolfie in the next were my only 2 winners on the day. Wolfie. Matt did have an unusually tough day for him. You all would have loved his reaction. Cut in half mid-race, better than the Derby reaction video he's referring to. I was not. I mean, that's huge. Listen, I don't put win bets like this, Pete, normally, right?
Yeah.
You go from 2 to 1 to 6. I mean, that's at least $1,000 difference there. It was just, listen, I'm happy she won, though. It was a great training job. How good can this horse be? I mean, she's only newly turned 4-year-old, Pete. I think there's a lot of upside here.
Yeah, I would imagine. I forget. I looked at it. What was the buyer? Was it an improvement? It was 91, so it was lifetime top. No, I should have had it up. Lifetime buyer. Yeah, there if you look, the horse has only run 9 times, in the money 8, and is getting better. So you see, and you love to see from one year to the next, even though it was only a month. Yeah. You like to see any sort of incremental improvement, so you know that there's some potential growth there. And it was from 3 to 4, and a lot of horses improve from 3 to 4. So I think this one, it's weird though. There's not a ton of 1.5 mile races for, that are big name 1.5 miles. There's enough of them to make your money. But hey, I think this one's got nothing but upside, right? I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I think obviously she'll run New York. I think there's actually a race called the New York Stakes for a mile and a quarter for filly and mare. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity. She'll be a big factor. I don't know if she's like Breeders' Cup, filly and mare turf kind of quality. That's a long way to go for that.
That's a long way to go.
But there's a long way to go to that race. So we'll see. Personal best, easy name to remember.
Yeah.
Great win there for Irad, who.
He was awesome most of the day. I mean, he was.
Listen, again, say what you want. The guy is the best rider in the country. I mean, he just is. It's just pretty simple. Let's go to the next race, Pete. Sure. The next race we're going to talk about, And I know you're very happy about this result, and congrats to you, my friend, for this. Let me take the banner off the screen here for a second, by the way. There we go. Let's go to race 8. This was the inside information. There were 2 stories in this race, Pete. Really, Mary, I almost said 2 Marys. Mary Quite Contrary, who was also bet down to 2.6 to 1. That's obviously one of the main stories because she won. But listen, Obligatory, my daughter just absolutely did not fire at all.
No.
She was awful. In fact, really like 10 seconds into the race, I turned to Matt and I could see that who was it? Jose Ortiz was already scrubbing on her, Pete. And I said, this is not good for Obligatory.
Which is funny too, because I had picked on our show, I had picked Obligatory in 3rd, but not because I didn't think she wouldn't fire. So that was a complete out of the blue for me. I just thought that maybe she would be pace compromised because there wasn't a ton of pace in here, but it actually turned out that the pace was reasonable. I mean, if you look at the fractions, they didn't go slow. It wasn't what I expected. And yeah, that's just unlike her. She always unleashes a kick, and a lot of times maybe just has too much to do and doesn't get there, but doesn't just not run at all. So yeah, and I really love Obligatory too, and it was really disappointing.
Well, with the 5 fire in time sort of surprisingly go to the lead, there was a decent pace. You see at the bottom of the screen.
I mean, if you could see
that was not
those
the
fractions.
excuse. 22, 45, 110. I mean, she had pace to run into as I show the buyers. I mean, obviously, from what I read, I'm sure you did a little research after the races and articles, whatever, the last few days. She came back fine. She got a 74. I mean, so those of you that had Mary Quite Contrary, congratulations. Good on ya. Great call by you, Pete. But, if Obligatory runs her race, who knows what would have happened. You've got to believe, just by looking at the buyers, she would have been right there or won the race. So that was just a great combination for people like you who were trying to beat Obligatory. Not only did your horse run well, but Obligatory didn't fire. It's just a great combination.
Yeah, and I mean on the show I was surprised at the odds on the second place horse, Colorful Mischief, because on the show that's who I had said was Mary Quite Contrary, Colorful Mischief, and Mischief.
I think I had her 3rd, if I recall.
Yeah, and I know you guys had talked about Colorful Mischief, and in fact I heard on a couple other podcasts people make the same comments of, well, in that prior race Irad was shut off on her and she didn't get the room and she might have won in that other race. And I sort of just went the other way and said, yeah, we always say that, but I just thought Mary Quite Contrary is just a horse who's on the upswing and pretty much ran a perfect race here. Yeah.
This is just like the replay we showed her last race. I mean, out in the middle of the track.
Exactly.
Here's Obligatory just completely out of it. And here's Colorful Mischief again on the inside.
Again on the inside, yeah.
but this time got through with no problem. Did barely get up for 3rd. Is this a horse for course speed, or do you see Mary Quite Contrary going on the road and winning some more stakes at, who knows, Churchill out east, whatever?
Well, I mean, that's the biggest question. I mean, you just don't know. You can speculate, and it's a good horse. And I do like that. I mean, if you look at her chart, her buyers have either improved or stayed the same each race, but they are consistently going up. She got a 91. She paired up buyer tops. Our friend Matt Bernier always likes the paired up buyer tops and thinks there's a forward move after that. And I follow that one as well and sort of like that. But I mean, she's raced every race at Gulfstream. So you just don't know. You got to get her on the road and see what she can do. She's also undefeated with my man, Luca Panici.
Luca Panici.
I mean, she's undefeated with him in the saddle. So let's take him wherever she goes. Let's make sure he travels as well. So I mean, I'd like to see her again. Like a 91 isn't getting it done necessarily if you get to top notch. But I think, thank you, Christine. But I do think, hey, why the hell not? You got to give it a shot when you have a horse that's on the improve like that.
Shout out to Christine. I guess Christine's a little bit under the weather, from what I understand also. So Christine, I hope you feel better. And hopefully just the show tonight can bring you some laughs and some joy. So Christine, thanks for watching the show. And thank you for your email that you sent to me earlier today. Really appreciate that. This is a Florida bred, Pete. So she's done her damage in Florida, but she's gonna have to go on the road at some point. Like you said, let's get on to the next race here as I go ahead and do some switching. The next race is race 9. This is WL McKnight, and again, my buddy Pete Visco here called it on the show with the old wily veteran Red Knight getting a good pace setup. However, this horse just continues to run, and what an unbelievable effort, not only from Red Knight, Pete, but the story in this race. How about Maker, 1, 2,
Unbelievable.
3, with with a medium price that I loved, and Wicked Fast getting in third. Just unbelievable here as we take a look at the prices. Red Knight wins at 3.3 to 1 there. You can see, let me see if I can show both here. There we go. You see the prices on the top there, the mutuals. And then Wicked Fast at 45 to 1. Shoddy, 37 to 1. Again, in force, there are bombs underneath, but Red Knight gets it done. I believe a 9-year-old, correct, Pete?
Yeah, and that was the only. So going in, this was a race where I know for myself, I didn't love anything, and Red Knight was. And again, it's Irad, which it was nice to have him anywhere today because he was on that day because he was just excellent the whole day. But I thought that at least this one came out of Red Knight, came out of the turf. The only concern was, man, 9 years old now. It's been off for a couple of months. Is he still going to have it? And you just don't know the older you get when it's going to go at some point. And I mean, he had 2 bad races in a row, but the last one was the Breeders' Cup Turf, which he never should have been in. It was just one of those winning your ins, might as well go for the hell of it, and didn't run well. And then the other one finishes 8th by a length and a half and had to steady and was wide and had a terrible trip. But before that was in excellent form. So you figure, hey, if he can get back to 3 and 4 races back, this field is pretty light, and he could beat this field as long as he gets a little bit of pace to run into, and he got what he needed. And it was closers from everywhere coming.
I think for me, and I had some lessons learned myself. We're always trying to learn, Pete. I'm certainly not going to sit here and tell you, I know everything, because that'd be stupid. And that to say that I'm, right all the time would also be incredibly stupid. So to me, Pete, my takeaway is I rat on this horse. I mean, Irad's not going to win every race. Okay. We all know that, but there's intent. And that's one thing that I think I've improved a lot over the last 10 to 15 years, Pete, is like trainer intent, like reading behind the line, reading in between the lines, etc. Irad jumping on this horse just screams out this horse is ready to go. And I'm not big on 9-year-olds coming off layoffs. That was sort of my angle wide. And the post, although, again, he just takes back and makes a run. But still, he could have been a little bit wide on that first turn. I should have learned that it was just Irad and just was going to get a great trip. Although, if I knew he was going to be 3.3 to 1, I'm not sure I would have bet him anyway. But let's show the replay here, Pete, just the stretch run. Again, there was a decent pace there. Value Engineering was a horse that that I liked quite a bit in this race, Pete. Yeah. I thought Value Engineering ran fantastic. I mean, he fouled I think it was Channel Maker. Sorry. He fouled Channel Maker. Here's Value Engineering. Red Knight just in between horses. Look at this trip by Irad. Looks a lot like Personal Best, doesn't it, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. It's like watching them. If you watch them side by side, they'd be mirrors of each other. I mean, look at that. He just swept. And again, you talked about it with it, not just intent, but the running style of Red Knight fits the way Irad likes to ride. So they were a match made in heaven there. Yeah, Value Engineering was valiant. No, not almost pun intended, but ran a great race there. And you see that. I mean, them other horses are coming too. The Bombers, which if you had this super, you were pretty happy at 10 center paying 700 plus is pretty fantastic. If you went Maker, and who was on, I don't even know who was training, who finished 4th. It was Shoddy with Abreu. Another bomber. But yeah. But I mean,
here are the buyers there, Pete. I mean, Red Knight, he's not going to explode. He's a 9-year-old. You're not going to see like a
but he
runs his races. He does what he does.
Every time.
Value Engineering, if he continues on this trend, I see no reason why he can't be a factor in some of the long-distance races in New York. I don't know about Wicked Fast and Shoddy. Temple was a bit disappointing. The Channel Maker, I'm sure Paul will watch this, so we'll make sure we'll send it to him. We had 2 side bets, which I'll talk about in a minute here. But one of them we had a Channel Maker Palo Alto side bet. I guess I won. I mean, you won. Channel Maker finished 7th.
Winning the toilet bowl. 8th. Yeah, that's the toilet bowl win there.
Yeah, so I'm not going to say that I was right about Channel Maker. He just doesn't race well at Gulfstream. And Palo Alto, my concern was if he was a 1.5 mile horse, motion would have run him at that distance, and I was right about Palo Alto. Aban is just, he's not the same he was last year, Pete.
No.
And then my buddy Ajitare broke slow again and really hurt Aban, rushed up and actually helped Red Knight quite a bit.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. And I mean, yeah, I don't know what that horse, that was a weird trip and a weird ride, but I mean, that was a complete bomb of a fade by Agitare. And yeah, Bond, I don't know what happened to that horse. I mean, we had Pletcher on, you had Pletcher talking to him and he seemed a little more optimistic, but that horse just doesn't seem to, I don't know what the change would need to be for that horse to maybe just a bigger drop down or something to see if he can regain his confidence or whatever it is. But I mean, last time was an optional claimer 62 and he got whooped too. So who knows what to do with that one.
I'm proud of my tip on Valgineering because that definitely helped the exacta the tries. I wasn't sure he could win, but a tip out for me and a tip. So we combined there, crushed that race. Pete, I tried to find a little value. We're always trying to find value, but Red Knight was probably a little more logical just because of his resume. A great tip out for this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, and the only one, I was only pissed that I had Palo Alto in second, but to me, they were sort of second and third, and Red Knight was up on its own, so I was pretty happy with that pick.
All right, let's go on to the next race, and this one was, I guess, my shining moment I had two shining moments for myself for the day, although I will readily admit it was not a good day overall for me, so to sit here and say again that I crushed it, I did not. I gave out some nice picks, but in the big scope of things, it was not because of two horses, one you loved and one no one loved. But we'll get to that here in just a minute. Race 10. This was the Hooper and Endorsed comes through at 4.9 to 1. I was not surprised at the odds, although he was a little bit higher than I thought, Pete. I thought he could almost be the favorite. Miles D got crushed at the windows.
Yeah.
I guess we shouldn't be surprised by that based on the connections. But Endorsed wins at 4.9 to 1. Now, again, we're not going to show the whole race, but Pete, at the start of this race, this has been really annoying to me lately, and I got to talk to you about it. There were 4, 5, 6 speed horses signed on. There was bumping on the inside, and right after, about 3 seconds of the race, I turned to Matt, I'm like, this pace is not developing, which I thought it needed to be a little bit for Endorsed. You see on the bottom of the screen as I go full screen here, 23-3. I mean, based on what you saw on paper, Pete, if you liked a closer, you had to be irate after that first quarter. It's just, I wouldn't say it's inexplicable. It was explainable. There were a bunch of horses that bumped into each other, but again, I would never have had picking up pennies on the lead in that race ever.
I mean, no. I mean, I thought picking up pennies should be near the lead, but I thought this was one, I forget. I don't have it in front of me, but if you looked at just the pace figures alone, it looked like, oh man, this should be, excuse me, this should be a pretty hot pace. Everyone should be up there. They should be cutting 22, 22 and change at the minimum. In that first quarter, and it just didn't work out that way. And I don't know if that's what compromised Miles D. I had Miles D, and that was sort of a leap of faith that he would come back. And this is the race I had almost no confidence in any of the horses, which sucked because it was in the pick 5 sequence. That's why I was a little upset. I should have went deeper, but I mean, Endorsed is this is a horse who's just actually running better. I mean, it sounds stupid to say, but he always ran pretty good races, but he could never win. And now the last
I'll show the start, just some of the bumping here on the
go
inside.
ahead, show that.
Mish, the number 3, is acting crazy. He was the main speed, but Octane was supposed to show speed, the 4, and like they brush and Mish doesn't, and I think that hurt Miles D also. And the outside horses, just got the jump. And I'm not going to show the whole race, but there was an important point of this race. Here's Endorsed right here. You see picking up pennies sort of cruising, and here's Endorsed, and I didn't like this spot. He's sort of in between. They weren't flying. I don't know, but obviously I liked the way it ended. Endorsed, just typical Endorsed fashion, Pete. This horse has to be ridden. I mean, Luis Saez gets a serious workout every time you see, look, he's under the whip, but I wasn't worried. Like a lot of times you're like, okay, the horse is done. This is the way the horse has to be ridden. He's very grindy, but he's really good right now and just runs down a very game Dean delivers on the front end with Octane coming up the inside.
Yeah, and what you talk about being grindy and having to be ridden, and it makes him tougher for him to actually get up and close out these races, and that's what he had been doing. He kept, he would hit the board and he would do okay, and sometimes he'd throw in some clunkers, but he would hit the board and he would almost get there, but he could never just close the deal. Now he wins 2 in a row. I forget what was did you bring it up? I didn't remember what the buyer was this time. Is it a 96? So now you're talking.
Yeah.
Now you're talking improving buyers again. So, I mean, he's 7, but he seems to be a 7-year-old that somehow the light went on and he's on the improve. I mean, again, I don't think he's not a world beater or anything, but I think he's a horse that could actually win some races going forward instead of just maybe being a horse you can play underneath.
Well, what I like about Endoris, now we're going to assume that Michael Maker can keep him together. I mean, he is 7.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think Gulfstream would be the kind of track that would suit him, Pete. I mean, Gulfstream's not really a grindy kind of track. So if he can stay in form, maybe they'll ship him back to New York. Courses like Aqueduct and, you got the Met. I'm not saying he's a Met Mile candidate, but it's something to consider, at least for right now, in New York at Belmont. I mean, you'd think he'd be better along those like wide sweeping turns. That's what the grindy horses seem to do best.
Yeah.
He might be in line for a pretty good year, again, assuming Maker can keep them together.
I mean, and you also, I think, as long as you don't sort of overshoot where he should be, overshoot the placement and maybe put him too much. But I mean, he's obviously a graded stakes kind of horse. He's not necessarily a grade 1 type of horse, but if you can keep him in those grade 3 level races and even maybe a cheap grade 2 somewhere. I mean, because this field, the one thing it didn't come up very strong. And even the favorite, who turned out to be Miles D, had run 1 race in basically 2 years. So it feels like, this was a field that was ripe for the taking for a horse who's only seems to be getting better and seems to just be sharp right now. And Maker was on fire, so his whole barn was just burning down the track anyway.
Well, the next race, Pete, this is the first race of the Pegasus pick 3, so to speak. This is the one that really, really hurt because not only did I not have Queen Goddess on top, but we did not use Queen Goddess for the pool party at the Hawthorne OTB at all. We didn't use Shantasara on our main ticket either. We actually we used Delika, Ladies, not Lady Spitesbar, Lady Rockstar and Wakanaka on our main. We backed up with Shantasara. We had Queen Goddess nowhere. We should
didn't you read my 1-pager that you were handing out to people at the Crazy Pour? I mean, I wrote that one up for you.
There was a bunch of speed, and California horses don't do as well, and it just it was one. Congratulations to you, Pete. I also had Queen Goddess bet down to like 4-1, and as we were watching the odds board, when we saw like Wakanaka, we saw Shantasara like 2-1 ish. I turned to man, I said, this is not good. If she's really the goods in this race, she's, coming back off that poor start, Pete. I thought she'd be like 8-5, 7-5. She was ranging around like 2-1, 9-5, 5-2. Wakanaka opened up as the favorite, and we talked about on the show that she had, that issue at Churchill Downs, with that illness that very well. So,
yeah, let's not talk about that one.
So it looked like it was right for the taking. I have no problem with Lady Rockstar, Pete. And everyone out there, I'll be honest, I played a huge double. Miles D endorsed and the Reds to Lady Rockstar. I did some Dutching. Long story short, Pete, I was live to 34,000 to Lady Rockstar.
Oh, that would have been
in the contest. This was my big play of the day. I thought if I was right with Lady Rockstar, I'd be in the top 5 in the contest going to the Pegasus. So this was like, it wasn't an all-in shove, but it was a big shove. That's why personal best helped me, Pete, because that allowed me to put more money into that double. On the turn, I saw that 7 creep into the screen. We'll show it right now, and I was like, "Oh boy, here we go!" But your girl, Queen Goddess, with a fantastic ride and a great effort. Let's just go ahead right to the PPs here real quick. Queen Goddess won at 4.2-1. Shantasara ran, I thought, pretty darn well, actually. Slow start, big wide move into a pace that was reasonable, not crazy. Lady Rockstar, a very good third. Before we talk about the race, let's just show the stretch run.
Sure.
I'll show you the place where I started getting a little bit excited. See if I can find it here. It was about, yeah, that was a good spot. So when I was watching the chicklets, by the way, can we widen the camera angle here? I mean, I know we want to
come
show
on.
the leaders.
Yeah.
This is silly. We see 4 horses. I know they got the chicklets, but I'm sorry. This is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I like the tracks when they put the full screen on, a little subset on the bottom where they put the
like
full
show like
screen.
half the field. I
Yeah,
mean, this
show
is
us the
completely
field at least. Give us
ridiculous.
something. Yeah.
I agree. Anyway, so I'm watching the chicklet, and I know I need the 7 right about here, Pete.
Oh, you're pumped there.
Right.
Well, that's that same trip. That's that same trip that all the horses are getting.
Right about here, I'm like, come on, lady. And people are starting cheering that we're at the, Matt was giving me a little shove because he realized that Delika probably wasn't going to win this race. The 2, he liked Delika here. I was starting to get pretty excited, but it didn't last too long because even though she was making this bid, I saw Sean Desara come to the outside and just looked like, it looked like Sean Desara. There we go. Here's Lady Rockstar. It looked like Sean Desara the momentum. Right here, though, I mean, Queen Goddess on the wrong lead, by the way.
Yeah.
You can see leading with her left lead, but not slowing down at all.
Not at all.
There, she just switched leads there, just very late stretch. Sean Desara did make a big lake run, Pete. Lady Rockstar in 3rd.
Well, it's funny. Matt Shimura just put in the comments that Shantasara looks like she wants longer. And one of the things I put in our write-up and one of the keys for me was because Queen Goddess, once I started doing the write-up, which is funny because we don't necessarily do that. So we don't, put that much detail into our power picks all the time. For me, I was looking at it, and this turned out to be the horse that I liked the most, Queen Goddess. But it was more because I had knocks against the other horses, and Shantasara going into the race was 5 for 5 wins and 9 furlongs and up, and 0 for 6 under 9. And just what Matt was saying there, looks like she wants longer, and she doesn't run bad races except for that last one, which was just a weird clunker. And then the other thing I was unsure about was she keeps just being stuck off layoffs, and you just weren't sure if she was going to come back sharp off that. So I think, next time out, maybe if they stretch her out. Yeah.
And I also was concerned about firm turf, although I suppose you can dispel that thought because she
ran. Yeah.
But I think she still would prefer cut in the ground anyway.
Sure.
Based on her races, Queen Goddess speed runs 100 by her career top, Michael McCarthy. I mean, this guy's just fantastic. And Sayas gave her a perfect ride. To me, it was more a negative California turf horses. They come east, Pete. They just don't run well normally. Queen Goddess is the exception. She's only a 5-year-old. I think she could be primed for a big year in a division. Of course, a lot of the heavy hitters aren't out yet. I'm sure Chad's got some either coming over from Europe or whatever. And there's plenty of horses in this division that can be a factor, I'm assuming. But Queen Goddess stamped her place in this division right now for Eclipse Thoroughbred partners.
Yeah, and the other ones weren't here. So again, the theme of Pegasus Day was it was an awesome betting card, but none of the fields had superstars in it. So all of them were sort of ripe for the taking if you liked a horse outside of the favorite or even the top couple choices in some cases. These were really good horses, but nobody that sort of laid over the field. And Queen Goddess, like you said, is just on the improve, has shown a little versatility because had been winning on the lead, had run on the lead, had come from behind, now came from behind again. You get that nice buyer jump going from 4 to 5, which is, there's still logical progression from 4 to 5. I mean, she's not old. She's good there. And then she had the nice work 2 back. So it just showed she was kind of sharp. And the one thing I also liked was she was able to carry her speed going longer. So she was able to carry speed going 1.5 miles, even though she lost 1.125 miles, 1.25 miles. Now she's cutting back. So you knew she wasn't going to fade in the stretch, regardless of where she was placed. So that was my biggest thing was I thought she would appreciate it and have enough kick because she was more tactical. Whereas Shantasara, I think her problem is she comes from behind and the extra distance just helps her out late. Whereas I thought Queen Goddess was just more tactical and would be in a better position to get that first run. And she even exceeded my expectations. I mean, she sort of ran away with it. And you pop 100 by her, that's no joke. That's going to be competitive.
Yeah,
in big time
I wasn't
races.
sure she could pass good horses and hold off closers if she needed to, because it looked like her best races were on the lead. But obviously, she did. It'll be interesting to see if she goes back out west. She's going to dominate that division.
Yeah, that's pretty weak out there.
If she runs that race, I'm trying to think of the older filly mares out west that go distance. I mean, she's by far the best in that situation. Let's get to the next race, Pete. This is the Pegasus $1 million invitational turf for the males, and this was weird. This was a weird race on many levels. The winner is a Tone. Let's go ahead and show the PPs there. The winner was a Tone, who, let me show the chart here, who went off to me a surprisingly 3.8 to 1, almost the favorite over Ivar. And the more money this took, Pete, the more I was thinking this horse is super duper live. It was with Irad. I liked him. I had him, I think third on the show. I'd have to go back, maybe second. I can't recall. I got to go back and look. But I wasn't sure I loved him on top necessarily. My top choice, we'll talk about here in a minute. Distance was the factor here for Ivar, Pete. We talked about it. He is the best horse. He just couldn't see out, the mile and eighth. However, he still runs Ivar and ran real well.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, and that was so I had a Tone. I had given out, when I had given out my picks on Twitter, I actually had a Tone as well. Was a little disappointed in how much he was bet, and I thought he was going to win from closer to the lead. I didn't expect him to run down Ivar from off the pace, which you see him doing there. But for me, I was sort of against Ivar just on the top spot for what you talked about. I mean, he's a miler, and he doesn't seem to close out races when he goes longer. He just doesn't have that same kick. And I thought that wouldn't be an issue with a Tone. And I thought this was another one that was improving and, not to stick with the same theme, picked up Irad, who also gave this horse the perfect trip again. I mean, and had Maker. So there were sort of common threads through a lot of these races. And I happened to pick a lot of them by accident. But the Irad factor was one. And again, look at this one, popped a monster workout 2 back, then got sort of a maintenance workout last time, but popped 100 buyer in November. And again, there's another one that's just sort of looked to be on the improve against a field where if Ivar is your favorite going a mile and an eighth, it's not the best field and it's for the taking. So I think I was hoping for a better price, but it worked out. And there was a couple disappointing horses. I think Paul liked Wit. If I remember, did Paul like Wit?
That's the other. We'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
A bunch of comments. Let's bring them up. Lon Garfield, Queen Goddess, good work, Mr. Wellman from Eclipse Thoroughbred. Absolutely, Lon. Christine Race. It takes guts to lay out a 25 to 1 shot with exact wagering strategy before the race in writing. Christine, thank you. She's referring, of course, to the number 7, who you can see right here, Speaking Scout, who I talked about on the show quite a bit on Thursday, and he ran his eyeballs out. 24 to 1, ran third, filled out the try. I did not play the trifecta in the contest because we were focusing on doubles and win bets mainly. Although if I were playing tries, I probably would have had that because I liked the Tone and I liked Ivar, and Ivar is my top choice. I think I actually went 10-7-3 on the show. I have to go back and look. So I think I had the trifecta cold, so to speak. So, but anyway, Speaking Scout, thank you, Christine. Speaking Scout ran fantastic. Matthew Chimura, grade 1 at a mile for Ivar. He deserves it. Been running against some monsters. No question about it, Matthew. He's a really good horse. He's just running tough spots. Here's a new person I don't think we've seen, Edward McGann.
Welcome,
Edward, thank you very much for joining the show, Edward. Appreciate it. He needed Ivar, the 12 for the pick 5, the 6. Oh, boy, that is.
That's tough.
Sorry, Edward, man. But thanks for joining the show. Appreciate it. Trish Smith, who won the contest? I don't recall. If Matt Miller is still on, maybe he can remind you. I think it's public knowledge. You can look it up. There's someone fairly well known, but I can't recall, to be honest. And let's see. So that takes care of the comments there, Pete. Let's bring us back full screen here. I'll bring up the chart. There it is. A Tone, Ivar, Speaking Scout. That try was 148 for 50 cents, Pete. And again, perfect example of the back wheel reverse key play that I've been hitting on. And, I get it wrong, obviously, sometimes, but lately I've been getting it more right. In fact, I've been much better with that bet, Pete, than the pick 4s and 5s, to be very honest with everyone out there. And you got 7-2 over 7-2, which you wouldn't think would pay much, even in a big field. boom, you get that 24-1 in third. It really spices it up. 150 for 50 cents beat with two very logicals, 1-2.
Yeah, I mean that's the I mean I like that bet. I've been using it a lot more since you sort of keep talking about it, and I use it a lot more. But I think this one I didn't bet the race individually. I only had it in horizontals, but I would have.
Thanks,
I think
Tom.
I
You
would.
said I had 10, 7,
Yep,
3.
there
Yeah.
you go. I
Yeah.
would have had this try. The only horse that I had that ran terrible, we'll get to, is City Man. I had City Man in my top 3 with a Tone and Ivar, and then sort of Speaking Scout was basically next with Lady Spitesphere. So I was sort of all over the board except for the Rosario factor apparently. But yeah, no, that's a great play, and especially when you got a nice closer, so a horse like Speaking Scout's going to have run late, and all you have to hope for is that he can get there, and at that price. I mean, that works out perfect. Again, the only thing not for you, for the viewers and listeners, is it's tough. Yeah, you can give it out, and you give it out, and it'll say, hey, play this one underneath. Obviously, you also have to pick the other horses. So it's not just a given all the time. But
no.
I mean, if you have one that you like and you're confident in your other horses, it's a great way to bet it where you can maybe make a nice score for sure.
And you don't have, again, we'll move on here, Pete, but you do not have to bet a lot of money. If you key one horse, even 2 horses, because I sent out a video also for our yearly subscribers. One horse, obviously get up to 3, now it's a bigger ticket, but one horse especially, 4 by 1 by all, it's like a $12 for 50 cents. I mean, it's not that much. You can, it's very affordable ticket. We see on the screen, I'll just show this final eighth right here. I mean, a Tone in 11.1, that is absolutely flying. So he was flying. And Speaking Scout 11.5, one of the lower ones. Coincidentally, Pete, the horse that finished last and second to last actually closed well, but it sort of shows you how the pace somewhat held together, and they just couldn't make up ground. The other interesting thing I found here, Pete, look at the buyers on the left side of the screen. A Tone with a 103, but City Man, I mean, 94 is not horrible. I mean, it's not really that far off what he'd been running in general. So this was, a lot of horses fairly close together, at the end, which tells you what, Pete?
Usually it tells you it's not the best of races when they're all bunched up. And a trip mattered. Well, like a horse like City Man was a little compromised post-wise, and Rosario did that horse no favors in order to get him in position and just sort of left him in the back in a race where everybody else was sort of moving. But like you said, maybe had a little punch at the end, not much, but enough to where maybe if he was a little closer, he at least runs a respectable race as opposed to finishing dead last. And
all right, now Paul Halloran, we got to remember this is happening at 49.17. Remember that number, Pete? So I can send this to Paul Halloran because I had something set up. I must have had a brain cramp with him appearing tonight, but that's okay. So we gotta go back to Friday's show, or excuse me, Thursday's show. So something happened at Thursday's show, Pete, where Paul, as usual, ran his mouth as usual, mentioned the Palo Alto channel maker, and he was so confident with his wit bet. Let's go back just for about 40 seconds to Thursday's show where Paul Halloran, the wonderful award-winning writer and co-host, challenged moi, did not believe in Speaking Scout, and loved wit. Let's go back and listen to what happened on that show. Whoops, I need to stop and make sure I bring up the sound this time, Pete. So let's bring on the sound here, and let's hear a short clip from Thursday's show. Here it is, folks.
The record last night, I had Palo Alto versus Channel Maker in a head-to-head with you, which we'll resolve later. And tonight, it's going to be Wit versus Speaking Scout.
Double. Let me get. Where's my wallet? Well,
okay,
absolutely.
So it was Channel Maker last night, right,
yes,
Kyle?
It was correct. Yeah.
Paul, I will say that the rail is going to work out well for Witt. He's going to save ground.
Well, he's in the rail. They tell you the post positions ahead of time. They're good like that.
No, I'm not saying I don't want to make the bet. I'm just simply saying that's a feather in your cap. Absolutely. Oh, Paul Halloran.
Yeah, so, he's at a basketball game tonight. I think that's the reason why.
Yeah, interesting. I don't recall giving the night off. I'm going to check my emails very, very carefully. I think he just has trouble, admitting when he's wrong, Pete.
Yeah.
But I did create a banner, so it should be 2-0, right? Should be 2-0 Howard. But my tip out on O'Connor was so freaking bad. I'm not sure O'Connor has crossed the wire yet. I had to give Paul a point because he was right about O'Connor. So, Paul, when you hear this, it's 2-1. I'm ahead. I challenge you to one next time. We're going to talk about O'Connor right now, but win some, lose some. That's the way it goes. But, that's the good thing about we interviewed Pletcher, and I was trying to be respectful, of course. I was suggesting that maybe Witt didn't want the 1 1/8. And if you listen carefully what he said and you read his vibe, I think he was also worried about that too, and it ended up being right because he got a perfect trip.
Well, and it's funny. So I was completely off Witt. Like I had him in nothing, and part of it was, and this was in the stats of the day that comes along with the power picks. If people care about that, Practical Joke, his sire in turf roots, 5 for 90 wins. So it's just not his. It's just not his game. And you might look at it. And last time out, he was closing into, because that was a 1 1/8, I think, last time, right? And he was closing into that race, but it just didn't seem like he seemed like he could have actually gotten there if he had a little more kick. And I just had no confidence in that. So he was a complete toss for me once I sort of dug into the race. But I mean,
well, that's why I show the replay, because I thought he closed the last race, and Paul's like, but he was wide, but he didn't gallop out. See, that's where I think the gallop.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I did. I thought he should have.
I never got the impression he wants to go longer. It just didn't feel that way. High risk at both a tone and Doris spread and raced it for Godolphin, who also wanted a clip speed. I mean, Godolphin is on a
tear. Yeah.
Bro, and then JW wants to know if Rosario. Wow, has Rosario won a race yet at Gulfstream Park? Yes. Just didn't quite work out. Pete, let's get to the Pegasus here. We all know what happened. Congratulations to Bill Mott, who I know Paul voted for third, who wasn't even on the ballot.
Yeah.
And we talked about on our clip show. I agreed. I think Bill Mott's having quite a run right now. Art Collector gets the job done, Pete. 15-1 he went off at, actually 15.5-1. Defunded went off to me at a ridiculous sub 3-1, although he did run well. I got to give him credit. And then Stiletto Boy and Last Samurai. Boy, this looks a lot like the the McKnight mutuals, where you got bombs in third and fourth, Pete. There's a lot to talk about here. I'm going to let you expound on this race for quite a while. I'll just let you go ahead and talk. You see the mutuals, and there's the chart.
Well, first thing I'll say is our collector at 15. Based on looking at horse racing Twitter, you thought it would have been 4-5 with everyone who loved Art Collector. I mean, everybody and their mother was saying, I knew Art Collector was the win. I'm like, why the hell was it 15-1? Apparently.
Jesus Christ.
Although I think this is a race, because I always liked Art Collector, but he always seemed like whenever he got into deeper waters is when he had trouble. The problem was these waters weren't that deep, and so maybe that was the one key where you kind of come up with this horse. And then you see was 7 for 9, 1 1/8, just loves a 1 1/8, even though that last race was disappointing. But Rich Strike was in there. He wasn't beating Rich Strike. So, I mean, come on, that's obvious. So you can't really blame him for that. But, I mean, if you just look on figures, this horse fits at his best. He fits with the other top horses in this race. The biggest thing for me, Howard, can you go back to the chart for 1 second? And I noticed this sort of after, and there were, you actually scroll down a little bit, you can see the whole field. There were 4 4-year-olds in this race, and all of them had potential either on the win end or at least to hit the board, and they all ran out. So I wondered if there was something to take away from that, where, hey, these are just newly turned 4-year-olds going against pretty experienced older horses who have been in big races against open company. And maybe that also had something to do with it. Maybe that would have been a way to maybe lean towards some of the older horses if you could come up with them. So I didn't really pay attention to that as much until after, when I was looking at the chart. So, but you see there, like you see again, if you have to say something about the buyers, you have any thoughts on the buyers?
Well, I mean, look, this is not sour grapes. I never would have had Art Collector. I've said on Twitter many times, congrats to anyone who had Art Collector. Fantastic pick if you had him. To suggest that this race was going to happen for Art Collector, to me, is a bit silly, okay?
Yeah.
Sure, he could have run like a 101, but he was on downturn. He was off for a few months. They were concerned about some foot issues. I know Matt said he was working well. I mean, obviously he's not going to run a lame horse in the race, but he paired up his Beyer top from 2021. I just, with a lot of other speed in the race speed, it looked like he was more a need the lead type. Where does his ability to stalk off of pretty legitimate speed and close like that and run off the screen? I mean, obviously just all worked out for him. Defunded ran a very good race. To me, this is also a story of a horse that didn't run. I mean, Cyberknife was awful.
Yeah.
And can people please stop saying it was the 10-hole? Watch the damn race. It was not the 10-hole. He wasn't that wide. He was on the 2 path for much of the backstretch. Sure, he went wide on the final turn, but a lot of horses have to do that. Art Collector lost a lot of ground too, if you watch the race. So this whole narrative that it was the 10-hole that lost the race for Cyberknife is completely ridiculous. He ran a 92 Beyer, Pete. He was awful. And equally, if not worse, was White Barrio.
That's
and
who
those
I
are my
had
top
on,
two choices. So I'm not going to sit here, and make excuses. White Barrio, Pete, got a dream trip. And
Perfect trip.
Matt. So let's talk about the contest real quick for fun. Let me take this off the screen. Pete, I had $6,500 going into the last race. And the leader was like 56,000, and a lot of other people were around 30,000, 28,000, etc. I did not play the contest to lose. I went for it. I figured, okay, let me get to somewhere in the 50,000 range. That probably wouldn't win it for me, but it would get me in the top 5. It'd get me a seat to the NHC next year. It would give me a nice, prize money of somewhere in the range of 15, 20,000 on top of the 45,000, whatever. I played a very big exacta Cyberknife over White Barrio. That was my exacta. That would have got me about 56,000. I then played other exactas Dutch with White Barrio on top with Defunded and Cyberknife second. That was my main play. I couldn't do a win bet, Pete. I mean, sure, I could have done a 1 win bet on Art Collector and win the whole damn thing, but I didn't like him.
Yeah.
I thought it was logical on the first turn in sort of the beginning of the backstretch where White Barrio, Pete, was sitting a dream trip and Cyberknife was comfortable. I turned to Matt. I said, this is very possible. And then neither of them they both just completely flattened out, especially White Barrio, which is completely awful. And speed held, Pete. That's the last thing I want to say. I'll let you talk about it as we bring up the chart with Stiletto Boy finishing third after Smith crossed over and went to the lead.
Well, what's funny is we talked about this, the race prior, or the one race where you had the 20 plus to 1 shot. In my notes for the race, the one note I had for Stiletto Boy was play underneath. And this was a race, though, where you'd have said, if I would have given that out and said, play this as a, here we go. Let me see what he's saying. If you watch.
Charge It. Matthew, yes, Charge It is back on the work tab.
Yeah, Charge It is coming
the older
back.
horse division's in trouble. I agree. Matthew Chamiro, thanks for joining the show. And then Jim Pilar has mentioned he agrees about Art Collector. He was live in the pick 5. His 2 A's, Defunded and O'Connor. I did not have Art Collector. Even as a C. I had Art Collector as a C, but it didn't matter at that point. Sorry, Pete, go ahead.
No, not at all. And I was just going to say, going back to that, the underneath trifecta, which I actually like that with Stiletto Boy, but wouldn't have had Art Collector. I had Defunded, but wouldn't have had Art Collector. So it's one of those where you're pissed because you came up with a 45 to 1 shot that you thought could hit the board, but you didn't have the top 2. You didn't have the winner in there. So it would have been beautiful if you hit like an all button, but you can't do that every friggin' race, or you start blowing your value there.
Well, Pete, you look at the chart, and I know you talk about this quite a bit, and so does many people, including our good friend Matt Bernier. First quarter, the horses that were first, second, and fourth ran 1, 2, 3. I mean, so no one really closed. I got to give a little credit to Proxy. Proxy was the only one who really made a big move late, so look out for Proxy next time. I was against him in general because I thought last time was the time. But I actually thought he ran sneaky good.
Well, and Rosario, who the theme for his day was having his horses just way too far in the back. So again, if Proxy looks more like a, second tier kind of horse, where he sits just a little bit off. So maybe if he's there with that kick, he gets into contention at least. And I mean, that's a lot of money on the board here. If you hit the board, there's some money to be taken in this race for your owners as well. Oh, there we go.
Joseph Johnson won with 101,430. So what's interesting about the contest, Pete, is after that, I think second place was like 56.
Wow.
And third was like 30, 25, 20. So a lot of people struck out on the Pegasus is my point.
Well, it's a tough one when the last race is one that you don't expect a lot of people to have, right? I mean, that's that in a contest, that's the tough part. So that's when people are generally reaching for trying to get that win. And I can't imagine a ton of people had Art Collector there in the room wherever they were.
Well, definitely not in the room.
Not in the room, but you know what I mean, in the contest.
Well.
Yeah.
So, Pete, here's how I want to close the show with one question for you, because although, like I said, I've been tipping out some nice horses underneath, but selfishly, I've been struggling a little bit with pick 4s and pick 5s lately. Again, I think it's important for me to be honest. And the reason why, I think my handicapping is just fine. The reason why is I'm just expecting paces that are not developing, Pete. And so do I start just like tossing closers and just only use them in my back wheel, trifectas? Is it situational? I mean, there's so many times, Pete, where it looks like there's speed. I'm not just talking about 2 horses. I'm talking like 3+ speed horses. And just on your day-to-day basis, no matter where, I don't know what it is, Pete, right now, but pace is just not developing and closers are just not winning very much. And that's really hurting me.
Well, and although in this day, it wasn't speed holding to win, so horses were coming a little off the pace. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we looked at some of these, and I know we use time form on the show, and you see time form, you see multiple 100+ time form early pace figures. In some of that one race, there were like 3 or 4 that were 120+.
It was the Hooper.
The Hooper, yes.
Yeah.
And they just don't go. And you don't know if it's a byproduct of, hey, they see the same things we see and they get timid because they don't want to get into a speed duel. But half the time they wind up compromising their own horses because that's the way that horse runs well, is to be near the lead. And so I think from a handicapping standpoint, maybe we just shouldn't get as bogged down saying this race is going to fall apart, because they just don't fall apart as much as we think they're going to. So I think if you're doing
especially on dirt, by the way.
Especially on dirt.
I've noticed that.
Yeah,
Turf races, you can close pretty far back. Dirt, it's just
dirt. Yeah, I'm thinking more dirt too. But I mean, maybe
the winter, like out east, maybe the track's just not conducive to like. There's probably a lot of factors. I'm gonna have to go back and look at it. But we're playing San Anita, that's speed favoring, right? You're playing Gulfstream, that's speed favoring. Aqueduct is not speed favoring, but it can be depending on track conditions. So I guess I just have to pay attention maybe more to track conditions. But the first, like for example, Pete, and then we'll close the show. I don't know if anyone out there watching played the mandatory Rainbow Pick 6 on Sunday at Gulfstream. But there was a bomb that won the first race. I think the name where the horse was actually, I think it was called Stat, if I recall. At 20-1, his time form, early time form US was like 78. And there were 3 others that are like 92, 95, like 96. And the 7 horse somehow got to the lead and wired the field. I mean,
wired it.
You can't, I can't handicap that. I don't like, horses aren't machines though, right? Like they're not going to break right every time. Sometimes they get bumped. And then sometimes if a jockey is really aggressive, look, any decent horse beat can go 23, 22 and change first quarter, right? No matter their ability, you just got to send them, right?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things too is you don't want to look back at a race and think you did something wrong when just some weird stuff happened. So you can't figure out, like I know a lot of times we want to look at it, and this happens on Twitter all the time, where someone wants to look at the race and go, oh, here's why I should have had that horse. Some races you just look at and say, no, I wasn't going to have this horse. There was no possible way. No. Some weird stuff went down. The pace didn't develop. Let me just move on from that one. But I do think the one thing to your point before we go is maybe like a horse that's coming from the back, unless it's a monster, unless it's just a horse that lays over the field, maybe you don't go super skinny or sort of single or have super confidence in a horse that's coming from behind. And you say in a race like that, if the horse that I like the best is a closer and I know that horse is going to need pace, that I need it to happen the way it maybe is on paper, maybe you can't be as confident in that just because it just doesn't happen. And, I love closers, unfortunately, and it screws you all the time because, like you said, the pace just doesn't set up the way you want it to. So maybe in that race you say, hey, if I'm going and I like a real deep closer, maybe let me also have a horse that's going to sit right off or be near the lead. If there is no pace or isn't a lot of pace, I'm going to have someone who's a little more tactical and maybe pair them up. And that's maybe how you configure your bets a little bit.
Well, it's an interesting conversation. And I'm going to do something this month I haven't done in a while, Pete. I'm actually going to play smaller or less horizontals. I'm going to try to really focus on this reverse key try play. I'm actually going to keep track of it, not for the public, but for myself, because that's really been a good play for me. And I think I need to play it more.
Yeah.
And, maybe when things aren't going as well with your horizontals, you got to back off a little bit and regroup. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all go through certain struggles with our horizontals. They're hard to hit. So I'm going to try doing that in the month of February, Pete, and see if I can recoup some of that horizontal money that I've been throwing away.
I think that's a good idea. I actually, after Pegasus Day was over, I just sat down and calculated if I would have just put a win bet, an exacta, and a try in each of the last six stakes races, I would have at least doubled my money at a minimum. And that was with small denominations. Instead, I played all horizontals, had all those winners and hit nothing because everything I played was pick threes and pick fives and didn't cash in because I wasn't betting the individual races themselves. So you have to modify.
As Marshall Graham has said on the show, the old pick one. There's nothing wrong with the pick one.
Pick one is nice. Yeah.
But listen, we're still going to do horizontals in the show, folks. I'm not crazy. Yeah. Okay. We are. There's still a ton of value in these horizontals. They're just hard to hit. And, but we're going to keep at it. Pete, it's been a great show tonight. A lot of fun. It's going to be interesting to see where some of these horses go. Of course, there's a lot of really good horses laying in the weeds, especially for Saudi and Dubai, like Country Grammar and some others. And of course, right now, Taba is clearly the best older horse in the country. I'm sorry, no disrespect to Art Collector, but if Art Collector continues to run this way, that will certainly change the dynamic for sure. So for my co-host, Pete Visco, this has been your host, Howard Kravitz. It's been episode 227 of the HHH Racing Podcast. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern, Bettin and Boozin, Kyle Roscoe, Charlie Freeman, Patrick Kunzel. They'll be chopping up the Thursday slate of NBA action. There's a lot of really good games. And they're also going to be talking about, Pete, a really nice pick four sequence Saturday at Gulfstream.
All stakes, right? Yeah.
All stakes, all grade 3, all 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Pick four. And I hear there's a surprise guest that might show up at the end of the show tomorrow. You'll have to wait and see who that's going to be. And then, of course, we're going to be on again Thursday night. Just you and I, as Paul will join us later in the show. But we're also going to have Peter Thomas Fornatal. Really excited about that to cover Santa Anita for Saturday. Thanks again, everyone. Have a fantastic night. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
See you, everybody.
If you have not followed his Triple H Horse Racing podcast, you're missing out. It's one of the best podcasts in the country.